I found out my parents were secretly paying for my sister's kids to go to private school while my own daughter was fighting for her life, and they refused to help. Please stay with me while I share my story, and if it touches your heart, don't forget to show some love and share it with others. My name is Mara. I'm a single mom in my 30s and work as a nurse. Life hasn't been easy, but I've always believed in working hard and doing the right thing. My little girl, Ellie, is 8 years old. She's the light of my life, full of laughter, kindness, and dreams. When she was diagnosed with leukemia, my world stopped. I remember sitting in the hospital room, holding her tiny hand, trying to stay strong even though my heart was breaking. The bills started coming faster than I could handle. I used my savings, sold a few things, and picked up every extra shift I could. Still, it wasn't enough. I thought about my parents, Carol and Jim. They'd always said family sticks together no matter what. They helped my sister Lena so many times before, so I truly believed they'd help us too. One Sunday afternoon, I went to their house. I told them everything, the treatment, the costs, how scared I was. My mom looked sad, and my dad sighed deeply. Then they said they wished they could help, but they were barely getting by. I believed them. I left their house in tears, telling myself it wasn't their fault. I didn't want to make anyone feel guilty. For weeks, I struggled to keep hope alive. Ellie's strength gave me courage. She smiled even when she felt sick, and that smile kept me going. Every night, I prayed that something would work out, that maybe my parents would find a way to help after all. But deep inside, something didn't feel right. I couldn't explain it then, but a small voice in my head told me there was more to the story. I brushed it off because I didn't want to believe my parents could ever lie to me. I was wrong. What I would soon find out would break my heart in ways I never imagined. Mara sat in her car for a long time before walking up to her parents' front door. The house looked the same as always, warm lights glowing through the windows, the smell of her mother's cooking floating outside. She hoped, more than anything, that they would understand how much she needed them now. When her mom opened the door, Mara forced a smile, trying to hide the exhaustion in her eyes. Her father was in his chair, reading the paper like nothing in the world was wrong. They listened as Mara explained Ellie's treatment costs and how the bills were growing faster than she could pay. Her voice shook as she told them she'd tried everything: extra shifts, loans, cutting every little expense. For a moment, her mom's eyes softened, and Mara thought they might say yes. But her dad looked away and said, "We wish we could help, sweetheart, but things are tight for us too." Her mom nodded, adding that the economy was rough and they were barely getting by. Mara's heart sank. She wanted to argue, to tell them she didn't need much, just a little help for Ellie's next treatment, but she couldn't bring herself to beg. Instead, she smiled weakly, said she understood, and thanked them anyway. She walked out before the tears could fall in front of them. Sitting in her car, she finally let them come, hands shaking as she whispered Ellie's name like a prayer. The next day, she went to see her sister, Lena. They hadn't been close lately, but Mara needed someone to talk to. Lena lived in a cozy house across town with her husband and 2 kids, Max and Holly. The kids ran around laughing, their backpacks tossed on the floor. Lena welcomed her in, polite but distracted. They chatted about Ellie's treatments, the hospital, and work. But something about Lena's tone felt off, too careful, too measured. When Mara mentioned how their parents couldn't help, Lena looked uncomfortable, her eyes darting away. She quickly changed the topic, saying something about the kids' school starting soon. Mara noticed the hesitation in her voice. There was a moment, just a flicker, when Lena's expression changed, like she knew something Mara didn't. Mara didn't press, but the feeling lingered, sharp and cold. Something wasn't right. A few days later, Mara stopped by her parents' house to drop off some old family photos her mom had asked for. As she stepped onto the porch, she heard her mother's voice through the open window. Carol was on the phone, speaking softly, almost whispering. Mara wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but one phrase froze her in place: the school tuition. Her mother laughed gently and said, "Don't worry, it's all taken care of for the year." Mara's brow furrowed. School tuition? What school? Maybe they had donated a little to the community or helped out a local child in need. Her parents had always been kind that way. She pushed the thought aside, telling herself not to read into it. Still, something about her mother's tone, relieved, almost proud, made her stomach twist. She knocked on the door, and her mom quickly hung up, greeting her with a bright smile, pretending nothing had happened. They chatted about Ellie for a bit, but Mara couldn't shake what she'd heard. When she drove home that evening, her mind kept circling back to those words, repeating them again and again. The next morning, another hospital envelope arrived. The bill was larger than any before. She sat at the kitchen table, staring at the numbers until her eyes blurred. Her hands trembled as she realized she didn't have enough for the next payment. Panic rose in her chest. She thought about calling her parents again. Maybe if they really understood how bad things were, they'd find a way to help. So she did. Her mom answered, voice warm but distant. Mara explained the situation, pleading quietly for any kind of support. But once again, her mother sighed and said they were still struggling themselves. Mara thanked her throat tight, and ended the call. That night, Ellie slept peacefully in her room, but Mara couldn't. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, feeling a gnawing unease she couldn't shake. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw her mom's smile and heard that one word, tuition. Why had she sounded so secretive? And who was she helping? The question burned deeper with every hour until finally, Mara decided she needed to find out the truth. Something didn't add up, and she wasn't going to ignore it anymore. One afternoon, Mara decided to drop off some old family papers that her sister needed for a tax form. It wasn't planned. She just happened to be driving by Lena's neighborhood after work. She thought it might be nice to see her niece and nephew for a few minutes. When Lena opened the door, she looked surprised but welcomed her in with a quick smile. The house was calm except for the faint sound of children laughing upstairs. Mara set the envelope on the kitchen counter. As she waited for Lena to finish pouring coffee, her eyes drifted across the room. That's when she noticed a few glossy brochures spread out beside her purse. The bold letters caught her attention: Brightwood Academy, Excellence in Education. She picked one up, glancing at the photos of smiling students in uniform. Before she could ask, Lena spoke without thinking. Oh, don't worry about that. Mom and Dad already paid for it anyway. Mara froze, her fingers still holding the edge of the paper. Slowly, she looked up at her sister. They what? Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. Lena blinked, realizing what she'd said. The color drained from her face. They helped a little. Just, with the registration. Her words stumbled over themselves, but it was too late. The truth hung in the air like smoke. Mara's chest tightened. The room suddenly felt smaller, heavier. She remembered her parents' voices saying they were barely getting by. She thought of Ellie in her hospital bed, pale and fragile, and the bills she could barely open anymore. Her parents hadn't been struggling. They'd chosen where their money went. Lena tried to change the subject, mumbling something about needing to pick up the kids soon. Mara couldn't speak. She placed the brochure back on the counter, careful not to look at her sister. Her heart pounded, her stomach hollow. She managed a quiet, "I should go," before heading for the door. Outside, the cool air hit her face, but it didn't help. She walked to her car in silence, every step heavier than the last. The betrayal burned deep, sharper than anger, deeper than sadness. Her parents had turned their backs on Ellie, not because they couldn't help, but because they chose not to. The next morning, Mara drove straight to her parents' house. Her hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly her knuckles turned white. The moment she parked, she didn't hesitate. She went straight to the door and rang the bell. Carol opened it with her usual gentle smile, but Mara didn't return it. Her father looked up from his chair, sensing the tension before a word was spoken. Mara's voice trembled, but her anger gave it strength. "How could you lie to me?" she asked, her eyes filling with tears. "You told me you couldn't help, but you were paying for Lena's kids to go to private school." The room went silent. Her mother's expression faltered, and her father set his newspaper aside. Carol sighed, trying to stay calm. "Mara, you have to understand," she began carefully. "It's an investment. Lena's kids have a future. We're helping them get the education they deserve." Mara blinked, hardly believing what she was hearing. "A future?" she repeated, her voice cracking. "Ellie might not have one if she doesn't get treatment." Her father spoke next, his tone sharp and cold. "You chose your path, Mara. You've always needed to learn responsibility. We can't fix every choice you've made." Those words hit harder than she expected. The air seemed to vanish from the room. She looked at them, her parents, the people she had trusted most, and saw nothing familiar in their faces. "Responsibility," she whispered. "You're talking about responsibility while my daughter is fighting for her life?" Carol's lips tightened, but she said nothing. Jim crossed his arms, his face hard. The silence was unbearable. Mara's anger finally broke through the heartbreak. "You could have saved her pain. You could have helped, even a little." Her voice echoed through the living room, but neither of them moved. They just stood there, cold and distant, like strangers. When she realized no apology was coming, no sign of regret, Mara turned toward the door. "Don't ever talk to me about family again," she said quietly, her voice shaking. "You made your choice." She walked out without looking back. As the door closed behind her, she felt something inside her break completely. That day, she promised herself she would never rely on them again. The days after that confrontation felt endless. Mara stopped answering calls, stopped visiting anyone. The silence in her apartment grew heavier with each passing hour. Every corner reminded her of how alone she and Ellie truly were. She tried to focus on work, on keeping life steady for her daughter, but the pain lingered like a shadow she couldn't escape. One evening, her phone rang. It was the hospital. The doctor's voice was gentle but heavy. Ellie's condition had taken a sudden turn. Mara felt her knees weaken as she listened, clutching the phone with both hands. She promised she'd be there right away, then grabbed her coat and ran out the door. Seeing Ellie pale and fragile again shattered whatever strength she had left. The doctors discussed another treatment option, one that could help, but it would cost more than Mara had left. That night, sitting by Ellie's bed, she made a decision. She would do whatever it took. The next day, she sold her car, her last real asset. It wasn't much, but it helped her cover part of the new treatment. She picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working until her feet throbbed and her back ached. On her few hours off, she started an online side job, writing and helping with medical surveys late into the night. Sleep became a luxury she could no longer afford. Despite everything, she kept a brave face for Ellie. Whenever her daughter opened her eyes, Mara smiled, whispering stories about the future, about the things they'd do once she got better. Inside, she was breaking, but she refused to let Ellie see that. Then something unexpected happened. Her coworkers noticed. Nurses, doctors, and even a few patients started donating small amounts, bringing food, sharing links to Ellie's story online. Messages from strangers poured in, people she'd never met offering support and prayers. Every word meant more than she could express. Mara realized something her parents never understood. Kindness didn't come from blood, it came from heart. Yet, even as hope slowly returned, a fire began to grow inside her. She couldn't forget the look on her parents' faces, their coldness, their excuses. She didn't want revenge born from anger. She wanted them to truly see what they'd done. And one day they would. Months passed, and time began to blur into a steady rhythm of hospital visits and long work. Then, one morning, the doctor called Mara into his office with news that left her speechless. A new experimental program had opened through the hospital's charity fund, offering treatment for children who couldn't afford it. They reviewed Ellie's case and decided to include her. Mara felt her knees go weak as tears filled her eyes. For the first time in months, hope didn't feel so far away. The treatments began, and slowly, Ellie's color returned. She smiled more often, laughed a little louder, and even started drawing again. Watching her daughter regain her strength brought a peace Mara hadn't felt in a long time. She still worked hard, but her world no longer felt like it was crumbling. The bills were lighter, and the nights felt less heavy. Life didn't suddenly become easy, but it became bearable. Mara didn't speak to her parents during that time. She didn't need to. Every milestone Ellie reached was proof that she could survive without their help. The silence from them was still painful, but it no longer had power over her. She focused on rebuilding her life, quietly, carefully, piece by piece. One evening, as she was cooking dinner, her phone rang. Seeing Lena's name surprised her. They hadn't spoken much since that awful day. Mara hesitated before answering. Lena's voice came through, shaky and rushed. Her husband had lost his job, and the tuition for Max and Holly's school was due soon. The tone in her sister's voice was one Mara recognized too well, fear mixed with desperation. "Mara, please," Lena said, almost whispering. "Can you talk to Mom and Dad for me? Maybe they'll listen to you." For a moment, Mara said nothing. She could almost hear her own heartbeat. The irony was sharp enough to taste. She pictured Ellie, sitting at the table coloring, alive because strangers cared more than their own family had. Finally, Mara let out a soft, humorless laugh. "You think they'll help me help you?" she said quietly. Lena didn't respond. The silence stretched between them, heavy and uncomfortable. When the call ended, Mara stood by the window, watching the evening sky fade to gold. For the first time, she didn't feel powerless, she felt free. A few weeks later, Mara heard a knock on her door late in the afternoon. When she opened it, she froze for a second. Her parents stood there, smiling in a way that didn't quite reach their eyes. Carol stepped forward, holding a small box of cookies, speaking in a soft tone Mara hadn't heard in months. "We've missed you, honey. We should all come together again. Family unity, that's what matters, right?" Mara didn't answer right away. She let them inside, offering polite smiles, pretending not to feel the old ache in her chest. They talked about Ellie for a while, how proud they were of her progress, how glad they were she was doing better. It sounded kind, but Mara could sense something behind their words. They weren't there for Ellie. They wanted something. Finally, Jim cleared his throat. "There's something we wanted to discuss, your Aunt Margaret's trust. You remember her, don't you? She left a sizable fund for the family." Carol quickly added, "But to access it, we need your signature as part of the estate's next generation clause. It's just a formality, really." Mara sat very still, letting them talk. The picture became clear in her mind. This wasn't about forgiveness or family. It was about money. And as usual, it was for Lena's benefit. Carol explained that Lena was having a hard time keeping up with tuition, that her kids might have to leave their school. She spoke as if it were some tragedy, as if losing a private education compared to fighting for a child's life. Mara kept her tone light. "Of course I understand," she said. "You know, I actually talked to the lawyer about Aunt Margaret's fund a while ago. Both of them froze. Carol's hand tightened around her teacup. Mara continued calmly. He told me the fund doesn't go to the sibling. It goes to the next generation. Ellie is the heir, not me. Carol's face went pale. Jim's voice rose instantly. You went behind our backs? You don't deserve that money, he shouted. Mara stood, her expression steady. You're wrong, she said softly. Ellie does. They stared at her in disbelief. She walked them to the door, her heart steady for the first time. They had taken her trust, but not her strength. This time, they were the ones left speechless. It didn't take long for the news to travel through the family. Relatives started calling, sending messages filled with curiosity and judgment. Some had heard that Mara had stolen the trust. Others said she had tricked her parents. But the truth couldn't be twisted for long. The lawyer confirmed that the fund had always been meant for Ellie, and Mara had only ensured it went where it belonged. Slowly, the gossip faded, replaced by silence. Lena, however, never reached out again. The last time they spoke was that uneasy phone call. When she found out the money couldn't be touched for her children, she stopped answering texts. Her absence didn't hurt the way it once would have. Carol sent a letter a week later, written neatly, every line distant and cold. She didn't apologize. Instead, she wrote about disappointment and family loyalty. Mara read it once, folded it carefully, and tucked it into a drawer she rarely opened. It was closure enough. For the first time in years, Mara's home felt peaceful. The constant ache of betrayal no longer controlled her. She focused on what mattered. Her daughter's health had continued to improve until the doctors finally used the word remission. When Mara heard it, she broke down in quiet relief, holding Ellie close as laughter and tears mixed together. Days grew brighter. Ellie went back to school, her energy returning, her laughter filling every corner of their small apartment. Mara watched her draw at the kitchen table, her curls bouncing as she smiled. Those moments made everything, the exhaustion, the heartbreak, the distance, worth it. One evening, as they were getting ready for bed, Ellie looked up from her pillow and asked softly, "Grandma's not coming back, is she?" The question hung in the air, innocent yet heavy. Mara sat beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "No, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Sometimes people love you only when it's easy for them. Some choose their love based on what benefits them. We don't do that." Ellie nodded, her small hand finding her mother's. "I'm glad it's just us," she whispered. Mara smiled through tears, kissing her forehead. In that moment, she realized she hadn't lost a family. She'd found peace, and that was enough. A full year passed, and life looked nothing like it once had. The hospital visits were now only for checkups, and Ellie had color in her cheeks again. Her laughter filled the mornings as she practiced her lines for the school play. Mara sat in the audience that evening, surrounded by other parents, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. When the curtain rose and Ellie stepped onto the stage, bright lights catching her hair, Mara felt her chest tighten with pride and relief. Ellie sang her part perfectly, her voice soft but confident. Every note felt like a heartbeat, every smile a reminder of how far they had come. Mara blinked away tears, not from sadness but from gratitude. The darkness that once surrounded them had lifted, replaced by something steady and pure, peace. As the applause filled the room, she thought about everything that had happened. The nights of fear, the betrayal, the loneliness. All of it had led her here. Pain had forced her to see the truth she'd once ignored. Blood doesn't always mean loyalty, and family isn't defined by last names or shared history. Sometimes, real love comes from the people who choose to stay when they have nothing to gain. When the play ended, Ellie ran into her mother's arms, laughing, cheeks flushed from excitement. Mara held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the steady rhythm of her heartbeat. That simple moment meant more than anything her parents could have offered. Driving home, the night quiet around them, Mara's thoughts drifted. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "They turned their backs on us when we needed them most. But I learned something. I learned that losing people can sometimes be the only way to save yourself." Ellie smiled sleepily beside her, unaware of the weight those words carried. Mara glanced at her, heart full, knowing they were both stronger for what they had survived. Later, as she tucked Ellie into bed, she looked down at her daughter and spoke softly to the quiet room, her voice steady but warm. "If you've ever been betrayed by the ones you trusted most, remember, you're not alone. Keep your heart kind, no matter what happens, because even when others fail you, love can still find its way back." Hey besties, thanks for staying till the end of this emotional story. Imagine begging your parents to help your sick child, only to find out they were secretly funding your sister's kids instead. Painful, right? But sometimes heartbreak teaches us who truly stands by us. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, share, drop a comment, and subscribe for more powerful stories. See you in the next one. Bye!